So members, what we're going to start out with here is the Chamber of Commerce. I don't know if Mr. Quillis, there you are. Mr. Quillis, if you're here, certainly identify yourself. Welcome to the committee. And if you would refer to parts of the bill that your organization is concerned about, we appreciate that.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, for the record, my name is Tony Quillis, and I'm the Director of Environmental Policy at the Minnesota Chamber of Commerce. And for this afternoon, I think I'm just going to focus on Article 4 of the House file dealing with PFAS in general, Mr. Chairman. You had, as you noted, a lengthy conversation about the issue yesterday, and I just wanted to kind of give you a 10,000-foot look down, if you will, at the issue from my perspective, and then some state and federal activity that is ongoing. But right now, Mr. Chairman, there are over 4,000 chemicals in the PFAS class structure. They don't all have the same toxicological effects. Their hazard and risk files are different for each of these chemicals and each of their use. They have a wide range of applications, and they have different properties and different characteristics. They're known for their resistance to grease, oil, water, and heat, and they provide flexibility and strength and durability for the products that they're used in. There are upwards of 6,000 uses for this product. It's used in such things as medical devices and MRI machines, automobiles, manufacturing processes, airplanes, solar panels, and cell phones are just some of the uses of this chemical. Mr. Chairman, one size fits all is not a way and an approach to apply this regulation to this chemical class. It's too big and it's too diverse. There's a lot of activity going on right now on the state and federal level, Mr. Chairman. EPA Administrator Reagan at the EPA has a PFAS roadmap. Right now, they're reviewing effluent limitation guidelines, risk assessments for this chemical. They're going to issue disposal and guidance documents. Additionally, they have a data review that we touched on a little bit yesterday of 20 specific PFAS applications. And all of that I just mentioned is going to be acted on in 2022 or early 2023. Here on the state level, the Minnesota Pollution Control Agency has released their blueprint. Also on the state level, we have fish tissue sampling in regards to PFAS going on right now. We've amended state contracts on purchasing compostable products with PFAS. The PCA is right now implementing their draft monitoring plan and has requests into industrial municipal facilities, airports, landfills, and wastewater treatment plants on whether they have PFAS at their facilities or in the process of the manufacturing facilities. The last year, Senator Weber in the final compromise bill last year had $600,000 for the Pollution Control Agency to create a PFAS stakeholder group to look at PFAS and wastewater and landfills. That group is to identify sources of PFAS. They're supposed to identify source reduction strategies, provide guidance and education documents, and identify items for future study. That report is due back here in January 31st of 2023 before this body. Mr. Chairman, I'm a member of that committee. As Mr. Kudelka pointed out yesterday, we've had 2 or 3 meetings already, and we've taken a pause right now. We have a request for a proposal out for a consultant to help us through those 4 things I just identified, and I'm not sure where that is in the process, but I'm sure we'll start meeting again here soon. Where there are alternatives, the industry has been moving towards them. But not all the products in all applications have alternatives, and not all of the alternatives have been tested. But where there is alternatives and they've been tested, the industry is moving there. And the example would be last year for food packaging, where there is an alternative and we move forward on that, Mr. Chairman. But not all of these PFAS PFAS chemicals also have health-based values or health risk limits tied to them either. This issue can't be solved just on the state or local level or by banning individual products. Mr. Chairman, in regards to all the individual bills that are in Article 4, just a quick review of them is there's no de minimis language included in any of them. There's no intentionally added language or what I call the manufacturer retail lag, where there's a stop date for a manufacturer of the product and then a stop date for the retail sale of the product. So, Mr. Chairman, I think we literally have put the proverbial cart before the horse with all this activity on the state and federal level before it's completed, before we move forward on any of this. And, Mr. Chairman, I'll wrap up. I know you've got some other people to testify, and I'll stick around for any questions. But there are letters in your packet, I think, from the Personal Care Products Association as well as from the Minnesota Retailers Association expressing their concerns also.
So I think in the interest of allowing you to move on to your next function, we'll go ahead and open it up for questions of the members. If you have any questions with regards to the testifier's testimony. Representative Waslick.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have some comments and then a question or two here. So first, I sort of want to respond to, I know we've had this ongoing conversation in previous committee hearings when we've heard the various PFAS bills, but I sort of want to respond to some of the things that I heard. So first, we're not banning all uses of PFAS with this bill. We have very specific products that we're going after, products that have really close contact with consumers. So we're not trying to ban all uses. We're not trying to ban the use in medical devices or all these other things that are really important. I also just want to address the point about regulating PFAS as a class of chemicals. There have been concerns raised to that issue several times in committees, and sort of the reasoning behind regulating these chemicals as a class is because one, they have similar properties, and as I've said earlier, I think I said this yesterday, research has shown that even the newer PFAS chemicals, which were supposed to be safer, are actually linked to negative health impacts. So one of the things that we have to keep in mind when we're regulating chemicals, whether it's as a class or not as a class, if we regulate them as a class, then we can prevent those regrettable substitutions, which is essentially what's happened with these newer PFAS chemicals, saying we're going to substitute these in for these bad ones. They're not actually found to be much better than the bad ones in terms of the health impacts. It's also a way for us to improve the efficiency and effectiveness of chemical management, and to sort of encourage different ways that when we know that it's all PFAS, when we're doing that cleanup, that we can clean up all of that chemical, and it's not just one or the other and that sort of thing. I would also say, I think testing was mentioned. It would take decades or even centuries how quickly the EPA tests chemicals to test every single PFAS chemical in existence. And while we wait for that testing to be done and we wait for the EPA to do things, these chemicals are going to continue to be used in products, and they're going to continue to contaminate the environment and accumulate in our bodies. I think my concern, I understand the concerns that Mr. Quillis is raising. My concern is that it's going to take a long time and a lot of money to clean up the current PFAS contamination. And all we're doing by delaying this is adding more contamination when we allow these chemicals to keep being used. So one thing I wanted to point out too is there's a lot of focus on the feds. And one thing that we know about the feds is that the EPA, if there's an election, presidential election, the EPA, the people that manage the EPA change. So if there's a Democratic administration or Republican administration, what we saw in the Trump administration was that they essentially put the kibosh on anything related to PFAS. So they didn't want to tackle the issue. The EPA didn't want to tackle that issue on the federal level when they had a different administration. So I just want to be clear that while I understand these concerns, it's not the entire story of these concerns. And I want to make sure that we're sort of addressing those things. One question I do have for Mr. Quillis, I don't know if he knows the answer to this or not, is what is I guess I know you're the Minnesota Chamber specifically, but what is the U.S. Chamber of Commerce? Where are they at on PFAS? What are their positions on various things? Do you have an idea?
Mr. Quillis.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Wozniak, I don't know off the top of my head. I'd be glad to find out what their position is, but off the top of my head, I couldn't tell you.
Representative Wozniak.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Mr. Quillis. So what I will say is what I do know about the U.S. Chamber is that they actually oppose the PFAS Action Act. They actively oppose this, and what this would have done was listed PFAS as a hazardous substance, and it would have aided in our efforts to clean up PFAS contamination. And I want to point out that the reason they oppose this, they can say what they want, but the reason they oppose this is because they have members that don't want to be accountable for the contamination that their products have caused. The Trump EPA killed many PFAS proposals. The U.S. Chamber of Commerce has lobbied against PFAS issues on the federal level. So I find it hard to believe that we're saying we should do things at the federal level because whatever, when they're lobbying against this on the federal level, and the EPA and past administrations has also killed PFAS regulation. So I think as a state, Minnesota can take action. We can take action and put into law these things so that regardless of what the chamber lobbies on at the federal level, regardless of what the EPA, whether that changes with administrations, that we actually have, we're taking action in our state to do this. I think that it's really important to note that if we're not banning it, who ends up paying for this? And it's either taxpayers who are going to see increases in drinking water rates because companies don't want to pay for the cleanup, and the taxpayers have to, or what we're seeing is that we have to spend money to so suing 3M, for example, and other companies that create these chemicals, that costs taxpayers money. And I think there's a way that we can come together and work on language in these provisions and get support from Senate Republicans, from House DFLers and House Republicans and Senate DFLers in this conference committee to really move forward on this issue. It's a big one, as Senator Ingebrigtsen, as you said, PFAS is everywhere. And the answer is not, let's just wait till the feds do something. The answer is let's do something about it now. So appreciate the time that you've been here, Tony, Mr. Quillis, and that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you. Maybe what I'll do is I'll follow up with a question. Mr. Quillis, you don't know where the National Chamber stands on this. Can you tell me about where our neighboring states are with PFAS most recently? Have they seen similar legislation, I guess is what I'm asking.
Mr. Chairman, it'd be hard for me to comment, but on my research looking at some of the bills that we've looked at in terms of carpets, textiles, cosmetics, cookware, ski wax, I have not seen, if you look at our surrounding states, and I'm just going to say North Dakota, South Dakota, Iowa, and Wisconsin, that I have seen anything that has passed the legislature in those surrounding states.
Okay. Chair Hansen.
If there are others online, I can wait.
Representative Morrison. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It strikes me that we have this same theme going on that we've talked about on other days, where as we learn new information, we have to pivot and adjust our behavior and change. I don't think anyone introduced PFAS hoping to do harm, but we have since learned that it is harmful and it is now ubiquitous. And so I'm wondering if this is sort of a blanket, we don't want to do anything around PFAS from the chamber, or if, for example, the provision to ban it in cosmetics. I know many people, myself included, who use mascara, for example, and I would rather not have some PFAS that close to my eye. I think most people would probably be okay with removing that from cosmetics. And I'm wondering if we look at it kind of piece by piece, would the chamber, and would you, Mr. Chair, be open, for example, to banning its use in cosmetics?
Was that directed at me? I'm sorry.
Mr. Chair, that was directed at you and Mr. Quillis.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. Well, obviously, I happen to think there needs to be a lot more research, but the question and I'll let Mr. Quillis answer, then I have a question for you, Representative.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Morrison, I've looked at a number of bills that have been talked about in other states, specifically California, Maryland, and Maine. And there are different approaches on how they look at this. There's also some federal action right now with Senator Susan Collins and Representative Dingell looking at this on a larger level. But there is also, to go back to Representative Wasilwick too, please understand where I pointed out today and said, where there is opportunities, and if there is hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars being spent by industry right now trying to find alternatives, and once they find those alternatives, to get them approved by the federal level. It's not that people aren't looking at this and understand where the market is going, whether it be cosmetics, cookware, juvenile products. Industry itself are spending, like I said, millions, if not billions of dollars in research and development right now to try and find alternatives. But in every single case, in every single application, sometimes they're not there. And what the use of the product is it encapsulated inside plastic? Is it exposed to touch? Human fingers touch. So there's different applications, different processes for it, Representative Morrison and Representative Wasilwick. But in terms of cosmetics, I think that a number of the major manufacturers, and I'm not going to try and go through and list them all because I'm not a cosmetic purchaser, but I know that a number of major manufacturers have been trying to find alternatives to it, and I think they have in some cases. So, Mr. Chairman, that would be my answer.
Yeah, thank you. And, it just sounds to me like other things that we've seen in the past where if you seem to want to legislate in a little bit in a hurry, it seems like the industry kind of takes that ball and starts to roll with it, and pretty soon you have products that are different. But when we're talking about it not being safe, Representative Morrison, I know you're a doctor. When you talk about how harmful this is, can you dive in a little deeper as to how truly harmful PFAS is in the human body? And maybe you don't want to answer that question,
But I wasn't sure if it was my turn to go. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Yep.
And I'm certainly not a researcher in PFAS. I think our resident expert actually is Representative Wasilwick. But there was an article, I think it was in the Duluth paper yesterday. They've called for advising people to not eat more than a single meal of smelt per month because of the levels of PFAS in the smelt. There is a whole body of research around the health impacts of PFAS, and they include heart health and immune suppression. There's concerns around in pregnancy and in children. And we know as we work to figure out how to remove PFAS from the environment, it strikes me that we should be doing everything we can to stop adding PFAS to the environment. So I guess that would be my response, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Well, the smelting is certainly interesting. I'm wondering if the same report is there for lutefisk. I'm not sure whether you can comment on that or not, because I'd be interested in that. But Representative Wasilwick, would you like to add a little more with regards to the health effects of PFAS?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, I wanted to add a little more on that and then to reply to the comment about what other states are doing. When it comes to the health impacts, there has been a lot of research, more so on the older PFAS chemicals, the PFOA and the PFOS. Recent research has shown that even the newer generation of PFAS chemicals are problematic. And one of the things that's most problematic in my mind is that these chemicals are being transferred to babies from mother to child through umbilical cord blood and breastfeeding. So little babies are starting out with this chemical in their blood. And what we know about it, because it bioaccumulates, is it doesn't just go away once it's there, it builds up. So I think that's one of the key health pieces that is really important to know, is that this is a chemical that bioaccumulates in human bodies. There's been quite a bit of research, though, on PFAS chemicals. Recent study has shown exposure to certain PFAS can lead to endocrine disruption in pregnant women and their fetuses. We're seeing, links to pregnancy-induced hypertension, liver damage, increased cholesterol, increased risk of thyroid disease, decreased antibody response to vaccines, increased risk of asthma, decreased fertility, and decreased birth rate. So these are all things that the Agency for Toxic Substances and Disease Registry at the CDC, sort of a place where some of this research comes together, have shown that PFAS might be linked to these conditions. So it is a really important piece. The other thing I wanted to notice, there was actually the National Institute of Environmental Health Sciences conducted a 28-day toxicity study comparing 7 different PFAS chemicals. This was in 2019. And these studies show that the current use PFAS, the newer PFAS that were introduced after the old ones were phased out because they were found to have negative health impacts, actually induced similar toxicity as the phased out PFAS. So we're not finding necessarily exactly the same things in the new PFAS as the old PFAS, but we are finding that they are causing issues. I did want to highlight what the state of Wisconsin is doing, since that was brought up in the conversation. The state of Wisconsin actually put out a comprehensive plan similar to our PFAS blueprint. And they went through a process where they had a lot of public engagement. And banning or phasing out PFAS use and PFAS containing products was one of the most commonly addressed topics in comments received from the public during this initial public outreach that happened in February 2020. So, constituents, citizens of Wisconsin are looking for these sorts of legislative things to happen. And in the action, what is sort of recommended that the state of Wisconsin do, based on these comments and other information, what's happening in other states, is that they actually pursue legislation requiring responsible product stewardship and comprehensive labeling, so that people know what's in these products. Right now, that's not a requirement. And then also whether or not they should pursue bans, more broad bans on PFAS use in these items. So that's sort of what Wisconsin's doing right now, and that's some work that's been done by an organization there on this issue. I'm not sure what the DNR or anyone else is doing, but I do know they also have an advisory, a fish advisory, because of the PFAS contamination. So just wanted to throw that out there as what other states are sort of following the lead of having this broader comprehensive plan to getting that together, and Wisconsin is doing that and pursuing some of the same things we're doing.
Well, thank you. It's very clear that you've done your work on this, and the talk about the term PFAS group, the PFAS, or I guess it would be anti-PFAS group that you refer to, and maybe I misunderstood you, but you even talked about if we don't change, there'll come a lawsuit, and I guess that kind of logic is for anything and everything nowadays. So, Mr. Quillis, I'm wondering, what would be the actual dollar impact to the consumers if these, as they call, very few changes here were to be made? Do you have any idea financially?
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, unfortunately, no, I don't. And I think it would be hard to put a fiscal impact on whether or not how the industry would deal with it, or whether they would even sell products here in the state dealing with carpet, textiles, cookware, cosmetics, juvenile products, ski wax. It'd be kind of tough, Mr. Chairman, to put a financial impact on that.
Okay. Mr. Lippert. Representative Lippert, there you go.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to circle back to the point about industry taking the ball and rolling with it, so to speak. I mean, I think what often happens with industry is that they don't move as quickly as they possibly can, or as creatively as they possibly can, until some regulations start coming into place as well. That we see that pressure provided by the state signaling that this is a chemical of concern, and we need to act, motivates industry to move even more quickly. It shapes the direction that the market's going to be going. And I think we have some very focused proposals here, like with banning PFAS in ski wax, for example, that would take steps in improving our safety, but also providing that signal. So I, for example, have a daughter who's on the Nordic team and would ski, wax her skis on a regular basis, be skiing or waxing before every race. Didn't recognize that she was, handling a substance that wasn't completely safe. And, I think many Minnesotans would be feeling that way too as they learn more and more about PFAS. So I think these are some simple targeted steps we can take that would improve safety and also send a clear signal to industry that we need this change as rapidly as possible.
Representative Hanson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And Mr. Quillis, I was listening very closely to what you said, and it appears that part of your concern, there were two issues that may make some opportunity for common ground. One was including intentionally added in terms of any of these proposals to state that the PFAS that is being used or that would be prohibited in use would be intentionally added, to have a prohibition on that versus the way the language is currently written. And if I remember last year correctly, Mr. Chair, that's what we did on the food packaging. We had intentionally added in the conference committee, and then that was able to be a moment of common ground and passage. Secondly, I heard you say about a staggered timeline for the ending of production and then the ending of retail of the particular product that had PFAS in it, so that the manufacturers stop, I'll just off the top of my head say January 1st, 2023, and the retail stops January 1st, 2024. Did I hear that correctly, that those are a couple of the concerns that you have? Is it that laddering of removing the topic or removing the product from commerce should have some steps, and that intentionally added should be one of the things that you would suggest?
Mr.
Quillen.
Chairman, Representative Hanson, every bill that I have looked at dealing with this issue in various states is including intentionally added in it. And you're right, that was a discussion we had last year with food packaging. And so that was number one concern for me, is the intentionally added language, because other states, as well as other things that we've passed here in Minnesota, always include that language. In terms of the manufacturer retail sale lag, we usually put that in there too, because it's just kind of hard to go through and say, you have to stop making ski wax on January 1st. Well, there's probably some on the shelves somewhere up at Lutsen or at Spirit Mountain. So that drop dead state, I mean, we usually have a sell-through. We have a stop manufacture and then a sell-through. But Mr. Chairman, Representative Hanson, those are just two of a long list of concerns I have with all of the sections in Article 4.
Representative Hanson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And Mr. Quillis, I listened very closely to what you just said, and you said to all of the sections in Article 4. So you have a menu of sections here, and it would seem, following up on what Representative Lippert said, I think most Minnesotans didn't know that there was PFAS in ski wax. They thought that ski wax was ski wax. What did we do before PFAS? We used wax. And there is an alternative there. Now, I don't think PFAS and ski wax is an essential product that every Minnesotan needs. So of all of these things, if you had a ladder out on the usage and intentionally added, would you still oppose that prohibition on ski wax? Or is that something we can find common ground on? Because if we can, I would have Representative Wasowicz work with the chair or whoever is the designated person on the Senate side to try to find some common ground that we could get at least some accomplishment here to reduce the amount of PFAS in the environment.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Hanson, are you just talking about ski wax or are you talking about all of Article 4?
Representative Hanson.
Mr. Chair, I just asked about ski wax.
Mr. Quillis.
I'd have to go back and look and find it in here, Mr. Chairman. But like I said, the sell-through, then go through and look at the intentionally added. And I'd have to look, and I'm going to apologize, I don't have my notes with me on the ski wax right now, on what the other concerns were there. But I know that I had a couple more other than those two on ski wax. The other ones, juvenile products, carpets and textiles and cosmetics, where the list was a little bit longer, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah. Representative Hanson.
Just looking for a little progress here, Mr. Quillis, and I think our team is willing to talk and try to find some common ground.
Representative Heinzman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I also was listening very closely, Mr. Quillis. And you talked briefly about what's happening at the federal level and how there may be changes coming for the entire country on this subject area. And the language in this section that we're discussing today is very targeted to a few products. And it's a piecemeal approach to this. And I'm not sure why these particular subject areas were picked. There may be some very specific reasoning, and we could probably talk a lot about what we should be or shouldn't be across the board, considering how many places we find these chemicals. But is that the right approach to target those, say we just discussed ski wax? Is that the low-hanging fruit? That'd be the first part of the question, I guess. Or could you expand on what's happening federally and the timeline again, if there was any more that you might be able to add to that? Because clearly you've researched this and you've done a lot of work trying to figure out how to protect health, as well as trying to figure out what's coming. And there could be more there that maybe would help the committee.
Mr. Chairman, Representative
Quilts.
Heitzman, there, to go back to the beginning again, there are over 6,000 uses of this product. And I think EPA Director Reagan had a hands-on experience with this from North Carolina, where he's from. And they had a lawsuit there, and so he's very familiar with how this works. And I think instead of trying to go through and ban 6,000 uses of it, trying to identify, okay, where's 20 areas here that we can go through where we think there's alternatives and that we can move through and help the industry get through it, whether it be grants, loans, to move them through on something that they're close on alternatives for, move them through, and it's not something that coats the engine of an airplane, where it's threatening the actual, public safety. Is it an MRI machine? Maybe we probably want to keep those around. So I think that the EPA, unfortunately, I don't have the 20 that they're looking at right now, but if I'm going to guess, they found 20 that they think they can get at, that there's alternatives, and working through to get those through their process, taking public comment to move through and look at those 20. And that would be a process I think that we could support rather than just pick them one by one and ban them.
Follow up?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a comment. We've been discussing this issue for quite a while, not just in this committee, but in the legislature here in Minnesota for years. And I think that it's a very important conversation to have, and it's important that we're discussing it here today. The impact of the legislation, as we're hearing in testimony, could be also very potentially dangerous to as we just heard, potentially public safety, if we're just looking at what's coming versus what's maybe in current conversation. And I hope that, and it sounds like there may be some progress, but I hope that those concerns are being heard as we're hearing testimony. For example, Mr. Chair, during the committee process, we questioned the $10,000 fines that could be potentially levied against those that unintentionally violate some of these rules. And the answer we got back was that, don't worry, that very rarely ever is applied. And I don't think that Minnesotans like that idea that at any moment they could be committing a crime without even knowing it. I brought up the proverbial small store owner in greater Minnesota that had a product on their shelf that may contain PFAS, who didn't know, didn't have a clue that could have been potentially impacted. And, you know, those are the unintended consequences that I want and I hope we can avoid. And so I'm glad we're having a very deliberate conversation, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. And on the Senate side, we have not had these conversations a whole lot. And that's why we're kind of indulging ourselves into finding out a little bit more. I guess, unless there's any other questions, I think we should move on. But it's very, here, okay, keep moving. Representative Morrison.
I think Representative Wozniak was before me.
Okay, that'd be fine. Representative Wozniak.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just again, want to echo, the U.S. Chamber of Commerce has lobbied against PFAS legislation on the federal level. The EPA changes with the administration. So unless I have a guarantee from somebody at the EPA that they're going to do everything that they possibly can by the end of, you know, before the next presidential election, there's no guarantee that anything's going to happen, because things get thrown aside when people come in a new administration that don't like what the previous EPA folks were doing. So that's part of this process, right? Is like, that's why we pass state laws. Colorado just passed a whole slew of legislation similar to what we're trying to do here. So it's not like no other states are doing this, that manufacturers and people who make these products don't already have to be looking at alternatives. As Mr. Quillis said, they already are. Other states are passing this legislation. They're going to have to do that anyways, and we don't have to wait for the feds to do something. We don't even know if they will do anything. And I want to point out too that a lot of the federal legislation, at least as far as I've read, isn't about banning products. There are other pieces that they're looking at doing, but a lot of this is really focused on the environmental piece. There's some work being done on, limits on drinking water and levels and that sort of thing. But what we're really trying to do here, it's not just the environmental piece. I know this is environmental omnibus bill, but it's also a public health issue that folks are using these products. Again, we chose very specific products. We're not going after MRI machines. We're not going after engines and airplanes. And I would actually argue that those would be considered essentially uses that don't have alternatives, and they probably wouldn't be involved in any sort of bans because they are important, and we know that. So just want to throw that out there again that, we've heard over and over again, let the feds do it. And the reality is that the same people fighting the ban here are fighting against PFAS legislation on the federal level. And I just find it sort of, it's not very consistent when we have folks advocating for federal changes and then the same groups of people advocating against federal changes. So I'd like to see something done. As Representative Heinzman said, I think there is some conversation to be had here on these pieces, and I'd like to move forward with something if we can do that. Thank you.
Representative Morrison.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I guess I want to echo Representative Wozniak that while I appreciate the enthusiasm for action at the federal level, and I agree that would be the ideal way to do it, because although we have borders around our states, obviously water flows where it will flow, for example. And so the best course of action would be federal legislation. But in the meantime, as was referenced, we've been talking about this for years. And while we've been talking about it, PFAS has been continuing to accumulate in our environment. This smelt thing in Duluth, you all, is really scary. 1 meal a month maximum because of the amount of PFAS in those fish. So if we want to continue to eat fish that we catch from the waters of Minnesota, if we want to continue to drink the water from our beautiful state, I would just urge us to increase our sense of urgency to address these issues. And I think there are some pretty reasonable approaches in the House bill. And so I hope that we'll be able to find some common ground so that we can make some progress for the people and the environment of Minnesota.
Okay. Members, I think we're going to move on. It's very clear to me, at least I can't answer for everybody on my side or anybody in this room for that matter, that we have a lot of work to do with regards to this. It sounds like at the federal level. Being it was brought up, I guess, obviously President Trump administration had a little different idea about this, and with the new president, they have a different idea. I'm thinking that President Trump came in and also assumed that the president before him had a different idea. So unfortunately, yes, nothing gets done, but it's in the hands of the administration that's there now, and if they're moving forward and trying to identify 20 areas of concern, I think that's something that's big. I mean, that's huge. Everybody will be watching that. Locally here, we still have the report coming back from Senator Weber, and I'd be interested to see, about landfills as well as wastewater. So with that, if you don't have any other questions, we will move on.
Mr. Chairman, thank you for the time. And then two things just to clarify. When we talk about action at the federal level, we're not talking about lobbying against legislation. This is agency action that Administrator Reagan has said is going to take. He doesn't need legislation to do it. He's going to do it. Yeah. And that blueprint or the roadmap that they have is said late 2022 and early 2023. And Mr. Chairman, the testifier that's going to be next is probably going to be able to give you an even more recent update on what's happening at the federal level.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Quillis. And we'll do that. We'll move to Sean Swearingen. Are you online? Okay.
Yes, Mr.
Welcome to the committee. Please identify yourself and give us your testimony. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My name is Sean Swearingen, and I am, sorry, it was technical issues. I think I'm also on video now, too?
Now you are, yes.
Okay, thank you. Sean Swearingen is my name for the record, and I'm a director with the American Chemistry Council, director of one of the panels, the Alliance for Telomere Chemistry Stewardship. And today my testimony is in opposition and I'd like to be considered for the bill. The mission of ATCF is to promote the responsible production, use, and management of fluorotelomere-based products, while also advocating for sound science and a risk-based approach to regulation. As alluded to earlier in testimony yesterday and here again today, work is being done at the federal regulatory agencies, and we agree with that regulation can be done effectively and collaboratively at the federal and state levels. There is an area of concern, though, as written in the included measures of this bill, and that's surrounding the definition of PFAS, and is an overly broad and not focused on the specific applications of concern. The definition being utilized is a structural definition that European regulatory agencies like OECD classify as not appropriate for regulatory enforcement. The broad definition of PFAS would have widespread unintended consequences. As written, the definition includes hundreds, if not thousands, of different chemistries. This does not consider risk assessments, hazards, and solubility of these thousands of different chemistries either, as it contains different chemistry classes. The definition should focus on specific chemistries of concern using clear and concise language. The EPA provides that approximately 600 PFAS are manufactured, included, imported, and or used in the United States. Among these 600 are substances in solid fluoropolymers, liquids, which would be for telomere-based alcohols, and gases, for example, hydrofluorocarbon refrigerant forms. The fundamental physical, chemical, and biological properties of solids, liquids, and gases are clearly different from one another, yet they are still grouped together under this definition. The legislative work being done in other states have been mentioned yesterday and today. Other states are looking at specific applications that are included in this legislation, like ski wax, juvenile products, and other consumer areas. Another state mentioned is Maine, who passed their extremely broad and overreaching essential uses concepts last year. What wasn't mentioned is that Maine is facing their own hurdles and stumbling blocks in implementing this legislation that was rushed. In Europe, they have continued to delay their own essential uses process in recognition of how a class-based approach is flawed. Finally, I'd like to speak to the alternatives process that was mentioned. While there are alternatives for some applications, not all have applicable alternatives. And in some cases, not all alternatives have been thoroughly analyzed and reviewed by agencies. The Washington State Department of Ecology is going through this exact process in their alternatives assessment and could not find applicable alternatives in performance and safety in several cases just in food packaging. They announced at the end of last year, they did find suitable, safer alternatives in 4 of 10 applications. And they recently announced, I think just earlier last week, that they're delaying their second alternative assessment on the other 6 of 10 applications that did not have safer alternatives. And this goes beyond the FDA phase-out agreement that was launched in 2020. So their own timeline will be after the FDA's timeline as they go through this alternative assessment. I appreciate your consideration, and I look forward to working with the members of the committee and the bill sponsors. And we'll stay online if there's any questions.
Members, any questions of the testifier? Representative Wozniak.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr. Swearingen, for being here. I do have a few questions. I wanted to follow up on one that I had asked in a previous committee hearing. How much money I don't know how exactly the Chemistry Council works. I know there's members, member organizations. And so do you have any sense of how much money your organization or the member organizations have spent on cleaning up PFAS contamination?
Certainly. Mr. Chair, Representative. Yes, I did some research on that, and I can't speak to the American Chemistry Council because we are a member trade association. So I don't think the organization itself has, but I'm sure members probably have like 3M. They're not a member of my group specifically, but I'm sure if you looked up, some of those individual companies have.
Representative Wozniak, follow up?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm hearing this different conversation about classes of chemicals. Can you tell me, I'm just wondering if you can tell me which PFAS chemicals are safe and which ones are not safe, according to research that's been done on the health impacts.
Mr. Swearingen.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair and Representative. I'll look at, I'll just use fluoropolymers, for example, and I know you've mentioned these and other members have. Those are considered a PFAS in this broad definition, but these fluoropolymers are highly stable. They don't leach. They don't leach with the human contact interaction. These are a type of PFAS that's been used in your medical devices and your stents, for instance. And then I'll take a look at fluorotelomers, which is part of the panel that I manage. That is used in textiles for personal protection equipment, but also chiefly looking at the medical field. So these are your medical gowns, your medical drapes. They're used to protect, our first responders and those in the healthcare field from biological hazards, which would be deemed safe.
Representative, follow up?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I guess I didn't hear an answer to the question. My question was which of these are safe, according to all the testing that's supposedly been done to show that they're safe. That's what I'm concerned about, and that's why that lack of knowledge about like what's safe and what's not safe is concerning to me. And I think there is research being done right with the EPA and other organizations, agencies, states doing this research. But I think that's a thing that is concerning, is that we're going to say we don't really know what's safe and not safe, but we're going to continue to use them, and we're going to oppose anyone that tries to say we don't want to use them because the research that we do have that's been done by scientific organizations does show human health impacts, negative health impacts. So just sort of want to point that out, that we are using probably millions of chemicals that we haven't actually tested, that the people who make them haven't tested to show us that they're safe. And we're finding out more and more information as time goes by that these chemicals aren't safe. And I think it's important that we take steps to address the PFAS contamination, not only for the human health effects, but for the fact that this is extremely, they're forever chemicals, they don't go away, and we have to end up paying for the cleanup costs from these companies that make these chemicals and that don't seem supportive of regulations and sort of don't seem supportive of wanting to help clean up with the cleanup costs, even though they are the organizations that have made these chemicals and have put us in this place where we are now with this widespread contamination. So that's all, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. Representative Morrison. Oh, I'm sorry,
Thank you,
Mr. Swearingen, would you like to respond?
If I could, Mr. Chair, I appreciate that, and thank you for your follow-up, Representative. And maybe I'll just dive a little bit deeper. These products do have to be thoroughly vetted and researched, one, by the individual manufacturers before they come to market, but then also by the regulatory agency that end up clearing them. So, I mean, if you're looking at food contact and other representative or other agencies, administrations were mentioned, the FDA, even though they vetted the food contact of PFAS in food packaging, they still went back and agreed to the phase-out timeline that was done under the Trump administration. And then now looking at other applications that's being done by the Biden administration. So whether it ebbs and flows, PFAS has still been a concern by these regulatory agencies over time. So the bottom line is all these chemistries have to be thoroughly vetted and reviewed before they go to market.
Mr. Chair, if I can just follow up with one question.
Yeah, quick follow-up. Thank you.
What does that review process look like? Does that involve animal studies? Is there a human health impact studies? What does that process look like?
Mr. Swearingen, if you can answer that.
Is it long-term?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, Representative, thank you. Great question. Happy to dive in a little bit further. I know there's different levels within different applications, whether it's animal studies, human health studies, long-term studies. Happy to talk to toxicologists and bring them and have them involved as well for further information. But that's a great question.
Representative Morrison.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for being here, Mr. Swearingen. I'm wondering if you have access to information about how many lobbyists the council employs and how much money the council invests in working to prevent regulation of PFAS or bans. And I'm curious if Mr. Quillis if he's still here, if he's able to comment on the amount of money the chamber invests in these efforts as well.
Mr. Swearingen, I'm not sure if the question is appropriate here, but if you want to give that a try, why, I'm sure you have somewhat of an idea, I guess, for an answer.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Representative. I really can't say off the top of my head, but if we're allowed to sort of take a look at that. And I would amend that to say, we're not trying to, my personal stake is not to try and stop any legislation, but try to work together with parties on both sides of the aisle. As I mentioned, we're looking to work cooperatively, as I mentioned, at all levels of regulation and legislation.
Representative, I think this kind of questioning is really not getting to the point of what the bill has got forward here, brought forward. We could go back and forth as to environmental interests and how much money they invest in things that the industry probably doesn't agree with back and forth. I just see this as a waste of time. So. Mr. Quillis, if you want to answer that, go ahead. Otherwise, I think we need to move on.
Mr. Chairman, no problem. The Campaign Public Finance Board requires us to report what we spend every year on lobbying, and it's public record.
Sure. Representative Morrison?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm really not trying to be inappropriate. I just think it's an important piece of the conversation for the public. I think it's important information for the public to understand as we have these conversations. So thank you for your answers,
Sure.
gentlemen.
And the public needs to know as well, that there's another side of the coin that also either supports or pushes for legislation on the environmental side as well. And I don't think that I would even bother to ask how much money that is, because quite frankly, I think some of that is probably covered under the First Amendment, and I don't really care. We want to get to the bottom of it no matter what here. So with that, members, I think we're going to move on. Thank you very much for the testifiers so far.
Just a quick.
Oh, I'm sorry, Rick, Representative Hansen had a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I had a question for Mr. Swearingen, because were you on during Mr. Quillis's presentation?
Mr. Swearingen.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, Representative, yes, I was.
Okay. So you heard my line of questioning relating to ski wax, and do you have the same concerns where the issues are the laddering of a phase out with the wholesaler and the retailer, where that is one type of correction to legislation that would be supportive, as well as the intentionally added provision? Are you in alignment with kind of those two concerns that were referenced with Mr. Quillis?
Mr. Swearingen.
Yes, Mr. Chair, Representative. Yeah, we're in line with those concerns. I tried to kind of keep it very large at the Pfas definition that applies, across the line of different sections of the bill. Intentionally added, we've seen is language has been added for a lot of other state legislations pieces, and we'd be in favor of that type of language being added here. I think it was also included in Maine's essential uses bill, and another state mentioned before was Colorado, and I think we worked with getting that similar language established there as well.
And Mr. Chair.
Go ahead.
And so, I understand and heard with interest the essential uses. So I want to be clear, we're not talking about airplane engines. We're not talking about medical devices. One of the things we're talking about is ski wax, which doesn't seem to be an essential use. There was wax before PFAS ski wax. And, even on the cosmetic side, mascara around the eyes, not all cosmetics, but what about what we put in around our eyes? Wouldn't we want to, maybe something that has, because the eyes are very absorbent for chemistry. I would say again, we would be willing to have discussions on those type of things where we can at least make some progress, where we're not putting PFAS into the environment. And they may be small. I'm not talking, again, about airplane engines. I'm talking about ski wax. And is there some place where we can find common ground there? I would ask if that's possible.
Mr. Swearingen.
Mr. Chair. Yeah. No, I completely agree, Representative. Those would not be essential uses, and I think there'd probably be some work there to be done. And, just to use an example, going back to definition, is that type of chemistry, if it is used in those applications, would be completely different than the type of PFAS that's utilized in airplane engines and cell phones and electric car batteries and the like. So I think there could be some work done there, yes.
Thank you. I guess I have a question, and I do see somebody here with regards to wastewater treatment. If PFAS were to continue, the prohibition of PFAS which obviously ends up in the wastewater. Have we got any numbers at all that we know of what wastewater treatment facilities would be up against, and what the costs would be? Maybe we could get PCA to come up as well, maybe? Welcome to the committee. I know this has been a concern, and I'm wondering if you can shed a little light on the.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the Conference Committee. Craig Johnson with the League of Minnesota Cities, and if I understood the question correctly, Wastewater treatment facilities have had a tremendous concern about PFAS compounds, both because of their potential impacts on the waters, that the receiving waters and the public health, but also because we hold permits that could end up being required to find ways to manage these chemicals. And right now, there is no identified technology that can remove these compounds from wastewater or stormwater because of the other organics and things that are found in those water flows. So while we have some ways we can treat drinking water that are very expensive and get a number of PFAS compounds out, the cost is kind of unknown at this point because we don't have a technology to remove it at wastewater plants right now.
Okay. Mr. Kudelka, do you have any concerns, or have you done any studies on what potentially could wastewater treatment facilities have to put forward in order to take all PFAS out of the water system?
Mr. Chair and committee members, for the record, Kirk Kudelka, Assistant Commissioner with the Minnesota Pollution Control Agency. Thank you for the question. We do not have any estimates, and like the League of Minnesota Cities testified, it's why it's so important that we really look upstream and source reduction to make sure that they don't have to deal with it.
Okay. So, Representative Heinzman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Kudelka, how about estimates as to how to fully remove PFAS from leachate?
Mr. Kudelka.
Mr. Chair and committee members, there are a few pilot projects that are being worked on right now. I don't have those numbers right now in front of me. Counties like St. Louis County are looking at various methods and including seeking funding from the legislature to help with those pilot projects.
Follow up?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes. Mr. Kudelka, what is NPCA?
I'm sorry, I'm not hearing the question.
I'll speak up. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Kudelka, how about what is NPCA looking at specifically relative to leachate and removal of PFAS?
Really? Mr. Kudelka.
Mr. Chair and committee members, thank you for the question. We are working with entities on their projects moving forward for pilots to remove it from leachate. But a lot of our focus is looking upstream, identifying sources, reducing sources, so we don't have to do the treatment at leachate pieces. For instance, we use legislative money to help with a source study on PFAS going to compost facilities and identify things like food packaging as a large source to that area. So identifying areas where PFAS is coming into these systems and then working with parties to remove it from that waste stream.
Follow up.
Mr. Chair, thank you. So the reason, Mr. Kudelka, that I'm asking is, of course, because these things are going to be persistent in landfills for a long time. And while MPCA may be focused on upstream sources at the moment, it seems prudent that we would be looking at how we deal with issues relative to leachate and landfills. And so I hope that's also a part of your focus, is a broad approach to this. And I've talked to you about this before in previous conversations, and I'm going to continue to bring it up because I think it's critical, and I think Minnesotans expect us, certainly expect MPCA as an agency, to be working on that very specifically. We can look upstream for another 100 years. I think all of us know that we're going to have to be also focused on PFAS as it already exists in landscape and in, for example, landfills.
Mr. Kudelka.
Mr. Chair and committee members, I appreciate that. And MPCA has supported efforts for funding through LCCMR for this type of work. And the governor's budget includes $2 million for community grants. And one of the areas we'd like to target is specifically those pilot projects, those who are looking to move ahead and test technologies in that. That would be one of the possible uses. So the MPCA agrees with you. We do believe there should be monetary support, and it is in the governor's budget for $2 million for the PFAS community grants.
Okay. Representative Hanson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. You know, I think this discussion actually proves the point on the prior discussion, that prevention is better than cleanup. So as long as every day, every hour, we keep adding PFAS to the environment, it shows up in landfills and wastewater eventually, and we can't get it out. So the only way to deal with it is to prevent it from going in. And I'm hopeful, after this discussion today, that we could at least make progress on non-essential PFAS in ski wax. Could we do one little thing to say we're not going to do more PFAS in the environment? Because when you're using it on the trail, it goes into the snow, goes from the snow into the water, gets into the water, goes to Lake Superior, gets in the smelt, gets in the landfill. Thousands of chemicals ending up in the environment, and then the public has to pay for the cleanup costs, whether it's the city or the state, and it's almost impossible. But we keep adding this stuff day in, day out, every hour, every minute into our environment, and it accumulates forever.